Hey everybody, Pastor Tanner here. Good to see you guys here on a Monday afternoon from wherever you're viewing from. I appreciate you swinging by. Guys, we just released the Pastor Tanner study bundles with Logos Bible software, and we put together a video, and I just went over the big high-level overview of what these are all about and what these are meant to do. And I told people that I would try and put together videos where I show how to utilize the resources. And I think it's fitting because we got at least one comment that asked, okay, I own these resources. How do I utilize them in order to prepare sermons or to prepare lessons? And so that's what I want to do here in this live stream today. When I actually go through and show you how to prepare sermons using the Pastor Tanner study bundles alone. So I've already done this once. I did it last week with the small. And this week, we're going to go ahead and jump into the medium study bundle. And I'm going to prepare a sermon, on John chapter 18, verses 39 to 40, Jesus and Barabbas. And I just want to talk through some of the resource differences and the things we're going to sort of tap into and use. Last one went over 2 hours, and that was just because I was trying to show the full process. This one might go similarly long, although I selected a much smaller pericope, so it might be fine. But anyway, that's what we're up to today. That's what we're here to do. And hopefully you guys find this video instructive and helpful and maybe give you a sense of what sort of study bundle you might want to get. Like I said, we put a lot of thought into these study bundles, and I hope it's helpful for you. Let me go ahead and show you the differences between small and medium, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so you can see over here on the right side, I have these to the last updated. I've got a separate account here where we have only included the Pastor Tanner study bundle resources, plus some like free resources that I'd accumulated in the past, okay? So these are very sparse libraries, and I want to show you how you can utilize just these resources in order to prepare some great sermons. Again, I told you we're on John chapter 18, verses 39 to 40, Jesus or Barabbas. And if you just go to the library here, you can see some of the resources that were added from the small study bundle. First, Life Application Bible Commentary. Thought it was really good to get this in here. Application is really important in sermons and sermon preparation. You can see here Apollos. This is essentially Old Testament equivalent of Pillar, so that should be good for us. Here's Alexander Maclaren, just more homiletic commentaries or sermons. I find Alexander Maclaren to be very helpful. Here you can see the ACCS, the Ancient Christian Commentary on the Scripture, and the RCS, the Reformed Commentary on Scripture. These are both collations of both early church fathers and reformers. And I really like the collations. I like to get those good quotes. Here you can see a lot of resources for quotations, illustrations. All those should be helpful for you. You also got some Spurgeon devotionals. This should be helpful for you. I just like being in Spurgeon in general. He's so good. And you can see different prayers, etc. Here we have Pillar included. And not only that, we've also got the Bible Knowledge Background Commentary. We've also got the Bible Knowledge Commentary to supplement your new Bible commentary. So I think you'll find that valuable. Here's the Catena Aurea, right? A couple of standard monographs, several mobile eds on preaching that I think you'll find very helpful. And we added the Concise DCL. And you remember in the previous one, we had the abridged TDNT. And so we're just trying to round that out here in terms of original languages. But again, our focus is mostly on commentaries. We also have the exegetical summaries. I love the exegetical summaries. I'm really happy to get them at Medium. And those are going to be one of the first ones we consult when we actually get into commentaries themselves. If we keep going here, again, you can see just some more generalized monographs and series on Old Testament, New Testament, etc. Very helpful. And continuing on here, we've got the actual BDAG 3rd edition and Louw-Nida. So these really beef up what we're doing on the Greek front of things. I've also got ISBE, the 1915 edition, and this should help you out because this in particular dictionary is like way more in depth than some of the other ones you have in the base small package. Here, another Bible background commentary. This is the IVP one. These were like the original Big Daddy, although this is the 2nd edition one. What's up, Giovanno? Good to see you. Welcome. Thanks for swinging by. And here's the Old Testament one. So the love Bible background commentaries. You get 2 of them here. And here's more of the Bible knowledge background commentary for Hebrews to Revelation. And then, of course, I already pointed out Pillar. The Theological Word Book of the Old Testament, TWOT. This is a Moody resource that wasn't always available. I'm glad it's here now. Again, just some more generalized monographs that should help you out. rounding out the sets. Here's the New Dictionary of Biblical Theology. Really happy to get this one. I was able to get the biblical imagery one in the small set, but here we get the biblical theology and then another theological dictionary as well. New Park Street Pulpit, just for getting some Spurgeon sermons. And again, this is more ACCS, Apollos. The Outline Bible, we're going to pair this with our Preacher's Outline and Study Bible, POSB, and we're going to pair these together to get two sets of good outlines for our text. And then you can, again, just see good monographs on preaching, persuasive preaching, excellent preaching, hope in darkness, preaching to be heard. Really like this one, very helpful for me on inductive sermons that I hadn't actually studied before I read it in this book, preparing sermons from page to pulpit, etc. So hopefully you find those helpful. And then Ralph's Septuagint. This allows us to get into the Septuagint as well. And this is the one I still consult, even with a larger library. The Sermon Outline Bible. Don't overlook this one. This one is oldie but a goodie, and I really like some of the collations in here as well. And then you can just see, kind of finishing things off, leadership. There's the Theological Word Book. I must have misspoke earlier. And Treasury of David from Spurgeon, and then just shepherding, right? So you can see very focused material that we added here in medium relative to small. Giovanno says, I think your library on your main account is worth over $1 million. I don't think that's the case, Giovanno. That's pretty wild. I appreciate you, Giovanno. You're awesome. That's so funny. I've been accumulating for many, many years on that account, and I definitely have spent thousands. But yeah, it's not millions. That's for sure. I don't have millions of dollars. You're the best, Giovanno. All right, so you can see that's in the library overall, what we've added. And so let's go ahead and start off by reading the text. And what I showed you guys before is I like to just read in multiple translations. I included in the small set multiple translations because I like to get that broad overview. So here we have the Christian Standard. I find no grounds for charging him is the last of verse 38. And again, very short pericope this time. I just want to focus on Jesus or Barabbas. I think there's a fundamental symbolic character to the fact that Barabbas is chosen over Jesus, and I want people to reflect on what does that mean in their lives as well. So here, Pilate to the Jews, you have a custom that I release one prisoner to you at Passover. Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? They shouted back, not this man, but Barabbas. Now, Barabbas was a revolutionary. And with a pericope this short, just 2 verses, I'm happy to just bring over all of the translations, and then we can look at them next to each other in the notes. And there's also resources we can use to actually examine them separately as well, right? So there's a couple ways you can go about this, but I like just bringing them over like this, and we'll go from there. So let's go to the ESV now. And ESV here, we have 39 and 40. But you have a custom that I should release one man to you at the Passover. Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? They cried out again, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber, right? And so here, we'll do the same thing. So you can see a difference here between, say, robber and revolutionary, right? So there's a difference there. And, I'm going to go through and do each of the translations, but if you don't know of it, there is a tool here that is, I believe it's called the passage analysis, and you can compare each of them. Oh, it's this text comparison. Both are actually really good. So there's passage analysis and text comparison. We can do the passage analysis is only with the Logos subscription, so I'm not able to do that one on this account. And let's see the text comparison, see if that one's available to us. Yeah, this one we've got. So that's pretty nice. So if we put this one in a floating window and bring it over here, you can see how these kind of all line up vertical, right? And since we're only referencing these 2 sets of verses right here, I think it's pretty handy. So again, here you can see the comparison of revolutionary, robber, taken part in an uprising. You can see that's much more dynamic equivalent in the NIV. I like to have some dynamic equivalency. Again, in the translations I reference. Now, Barabbas was a robber, so the KJV goes along similar with the ESV at this point. NLT, they shouted back, no, not this man, we want Barabbas. Barabbas was a revolutionary. So you have that one similar to the CSB in the NLNT. And let's go Message as well. I showed you guys I don't mind consulting the Message so long as I recognize that it's almost more a commentary or on the extreme end of the dynamic equivalency spectrum. So as long as you know those things, no problem. Let's add the NET as well. So the Message likes to put it, let's see. It's your custom that I pardon one prisoner at Passover. Do you want me to pardon the king of the Jews? They shouted back, not this one, but Barabbas. Barabbas was a Jewish freedom fighter. So a lot of, interpretation in there in terms of revolutionary or robber. In the message, they call him freedom fighter. And then the NET second edition is really a good one. I got it more for its notes, and it has fantastic notes, but it's really good in terms of its translation as well. It says, but it is your custom that I release one prisoner for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? They shouted back, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a revolutionary. So you can see a lot of translations focus on the revolutionary piece. Robber in the ESV and the KJV, I honestly have a feeling that the ESV is just trying to be a little more consistent with the KJV at this point. The NIV, I like how dynamic this is, had taken part in an uprising. And I don't mind the message here, Jewish freedom fighter. Again, recognizing that we might want to look up what is a Jewish freedom fighter, so that all the message is doing here at this point is prompting us to dig into, historically speaking, what is the kind of revolutionary that Barabbas would be. You see what I mean? And that's why it's handy. So again, let's look very particularly at 39. It looks to me the language is very similar here. You have a custom, you have a custom, you have a custom, you have a custom, custom, same language is used. Release a prisoner to you at Passover. Release one man for you at Passover. So why the difference between prisoner versus one man? That's interesting. There might be a textual critical note at that point, and we have the resources to look at that. A prisoner release that I should release unto you one. This just says one. So if the KJV here, I have a feeling this is a manuscript issue, right? Because KJV has a different text tradition than the rest of these translations. Let's keep going. Asking me to release one prisoner, one prisoner, one prisoner. Okay. At the Passover, do you want me to release to you the King of Jews? Do you want me to release to you the King of Jews? This is almost identical for all of them. Will ye therefore, would you like me to release? Do you want me to pardon? So pardon, again, ultra dynamically equivalent. We might want to look into pardon as a release and Jewish freedom fighter as a revolutionary, right? Release to you, King of the Jews. Okay, so perfect. That was a great comparison. And so we go release to pardon, question mark, and then revolutionary to freedom fighter. Really Jewish freedom fighter is how he had it. Okay, very interesting. Oh, got some tea here, by the way, as well. Delish. And let's see, Giovanno says a portfolio library has books in it worth $100,000 for $4,500. That's what I mean. Oh, I've got you. When it talks about the equivalent in hard copy, you might be right about that, Giovanno, because I advocate so much for buying base packages. Well, they used to be called base packages, libraries, and the libraries obviously get you a lot more bang for your buck. I understand what you mean entirely now, Giovanno, and yeah, you might be correct about that, because I have bought many libraries over the years and invested thousands of dollars. Yeah, good point. I hadn't thought of that. You might be right on that one. Okay, cool. So we've got a good sense of the text. It's very, very simple. And what I want us to do now is go with a little bit of a word for word. So if I open here and we do the exegetical guide and we do 18, John 18, 39 to 40, we're going to get a good sense very quickly of the word-to-word language that we want to grab a hold of, right? The word-to-word helps us to dig into the original languages. If you want to do your own exegesis before you dig into any commentaries and things like that, you have that opportunity using this. And this is where you're going to get your lexicons are going to be really helpful to you. And let's spend some time here because we added that Louw-Nida and we added BDAG, which are very helpful. If we were in the Hebrew, we have also added concise Kleins, but we're not in Hebrew, so it's okay. And so let's just go ahead and utilize these and see what we've got available to us. All right. So if you guys don't know how the word-to-word works, you can just come into here and specify or designate what sorts of lemmas will be included. Before we do that, let's actually get into the textual variants. So we've got our SBL apparatus, and this is also where, here's our NET notes, which are going to be really handy for us. And the other thing I like looking at, and I included this in the small, but it's here as well, is I love to look at, and I'll just open a passage guide for this because it's just going to make it easier, but you can also open the resource up individually. And for me, the let's see, where is it? It's probably because it has no hits, right? Let me look it up here. Philip Comfort. Right here, but I bet there's no hits on 39 and 40. See, there's not. There are hits for 37 and 38, but when you go 39 and 40, it's not there. So this shows us there aren't significant textual variants, at least according to Philip Comfort. I usually trust his judgment on these matters, so that's good to know. Now let's go to the exegetical guide, and we'll just look at the Greek here and see if there's any differences. Do we have ESV interlinears? I believe we do. Let's just do this way. I don't have NA28 yet, do I? No, I believe the NA28 is included at the large. Let's grab... We don't even need to do the parallel. Let's grab an interlinear here. And I've got reverse interlinear on, but I might be able to just go... No, that's not quite what I'm looking for. Let's try language Greek. So we've got our Septuagint, our NET. So we can look at our NET Greek. That's going to be helpful. And then we can look at our SBL. And we can just do these side by side. So actually what I'll do here is I'll throw the SBL on with our... And we'll look at these two. They should be relatively similar, right? So we're just looking at these two verses, okay? So Estin de Sunathea, Humin, Henna, Apolluso. That's very interesting. And that references are strong. So those are different words. Humin en to Pascha. And you can see here, Estin de Sunathea, Humin, Henna, Apolluso, Humin, en to Pascha. So they're essentially the same. Bleste un Apolluso, Bleste un Apolluso, Humin ta. Yeah. And so I think these probably come from the same text tradition. So it's no wonder that they're the same. But I just want to double check here and make sure there's no differences. And yeah. This one shows this parenthetically in the NET. But other than that, they look very similar to each other. So good. We're good on our Greek referencing. And then let's just check, since we have it, let's check the apparatus for the SBL. And what it notes here is there's just a couple of small minor differences. These are ones that are not noted by Philip Comfort because they're so small and minor, right? And so you have word order difference here between Apolluso Humin and Humin Apolluso. And this is Robinson Pierpont have the Humin Apolluso. So, you know, you're overwhelmingly going to go with the NA28 Westcott Hort text tradition on this one. And yeah, that's all there. It's a word order difference as far as I can tell. Maybe a little bit on the accent marks, but no, relatively the same. And then we have Pauline versus Pauline Pontes, right? And Pauline Pontes actually comes from a little bit more ancient, but it's certainly not present in the vast majority. So we shouldn't see Pauline Pontes in here. We just say Pauline. Yeah, so all it's showing is that some text traditions show Pauline Pontes Lagantes. So we're good. Neither of these are actionable at all. Small word order difference and the addition of all when it's really probably not the case in some of the earliest manuscripts. So boom, we're good with our textual variants, but that's a way you can utilize them for the apparatuses. And again, I like Philip Comfort on that one. Oftentimes you get exactly what you're looking for. Let's go to the word by word now. And with the word by word, we want to look into kind of why does the message, you know, incorporate this comment regarding, do you want to release? And they call it pardon. And then also calling Barabbas the revolutionary. We want to look at that particular word because two major translations call him a robber. So we have revolutionary in like 3 translations, robber in a couple, but they're big ones, ESV and KJV. And then finally, the Message translates this as Jewish freedom fighter. So it might give us opportunity to look up in our Bible dictionaries, what exactly is this kind of revolutionary that Barabbas is, right? So let's go ahead and scroll down. We have custom. We have a custom. This is a interesting word, but it was translated the same in nearly all of the actual um, in the actual translations. So you can see it's not unique in terms of its translation, but it's not a common word in the original languages, right? If you go to the Bible itself, it only occurs 3 times, twice in First Corinthians and once in John. So it does strike us as a significant word from just frequency of occurrence standpoint, although it may not be a significant word in terms of differences of translation. Does that make sense? So this one's interesting to us. Again, we now have our BDAG and our Louw-Nida to offset our LSJ and our DBL Greek. So honestly, in my opinion, even in the medium study bundle here, you're getting some decent original language resources, especially in the Greek. But let's go ahead and just pull up this Bible word study here. And never forget this resource that I smuggled into here at this level, the New Testament Greek English Dictionary from Thorolf Gilbrandt. I like this one a lot. Here's your 3 uses. Gives you your concordance. Being accustomed to the idol, 187, or we have no such custom neither in the churches, 11116. So that's very interesting. And right off the bat, you have some information regarding the classical Greek sense of this word, Septuagint usage, and then New Testament usage. I ended up implementing some of this New Testament usage stuff from this resource in my last sermon yesterday. So it's a good resource, guys, and I really like what we were able to put together for the Greek in terms of original language lexicons here. So let's just note this word. We're not going to deep dive it yet, but we will note this word. And the best way probably for us is to just grab this here. And here, let's text compare let's get our NET in here in the Greek. Boom. And boom, we got them right next to each other. Oh, this doesn't show the Greek. Did I grab the wrong one? There we go, the Greek text, not the English translation. Although the English translation pretty cool too. How cool is Logos? You can take your ESV translation and put it right next to your NET Greek, right? Pretty handy. And then, of course, we could put the NET in there too if we wanted. But yeah, so we're looking for custom. You have a custom right here. And of course, if we put on sympathetic highlighting, let me just show you how to do that real quick. Come up here, visual filters, and you want corresponding words to happen. We want the same lemma highlight. So now when I click custom, oh, I have it on hover, not click. So throw click on there. And now when I click custom, should highlight over here. Let's see, search results, text results. I might have to turn it on in this resource independently. So let's go do that. So we'll grab our NET Greek. We'll open up a separate resource. And then with our separate resource of our NET Greek, we also want to turn on the visual filter here of the corresponding words. We want to click and we want lemma. Boom. So now we turn this off, we turn this on, custom. I thought it would grab it here. Not sure what I did wrong. Let's see if we'll go resource to resource. Where's our custom word? We have a custom. It's not highlighting. But anyway, this is how you typically do it. Emphasize. Same word, click. Corresponding text in other books. Text selection. That's what I needed. So I probably need it here too. These are the sorts of things you like set up the first time and then you never touch again because they're always right. But it does sometimes take getting it set up right the first time. So I think I've got that basically in place. Let's see how it goes here. Man, I'm supposed to be the expert on this, but I can't get it to work right. Problem is I set it up years and years ago in my original one and haven't touched it since, like I said. So MacBook. I wonder if I need to do like surface text, all of these. I shouldn't though. It has the same underlying lemma. I'm not going to beat the drum too much on this one. Needless to say, you can get the sympathetic highlighting to line up between the two resources with a little bit of fiddling. And I thought that's how you did it, but it might be here. Anyway, I know it's this word. Boop. And we will grab this word. Do custom here. This is what we're looking for right here. So I will just copy referenced text. And so this is a word we want to look at. We'll just note that for ourselves. And for now, we'll just call it custom. And then let's keep going in our word by word. They shouted back. Cry out, shout, scream, cragadzo. I don't think it's important to reference this one. Only 9 uses in the New Testament. Majority of them in John. John uses this one a lot. I mean, it doesn't hurt, I suppose. We can grab it. Text, shout out or cry out. Okay, boom. Let's keep rolling. Barabbas, no need. Although it might be interesting to know like what his word means, especially if we're going to get symbolic with things. So actually, I take that back. I do want to know what Barabbas means. And then revolutionary, robber, highwayman, bandit. This was one that's very intriguing to us, especially given the variety of translations on this. So I'll put robber or revolutionary in this one in our notes. And then now, go more. So this is only verse 39, is because, oh no, that was 40. Barabbas was a robber. There we go. So is that all the ones I wanted? That's the custom. I have another word that let me just double check. Yeah, I was prompted by the message. What was it in the message? Release. The word for release or pardon. Right here, this word. Let's see what this word is. Apoluo. Apoluo. Let's grab that one as well. Release. So these are all words we could dig into, right? There's tons of in-depth word studies you could do. I will tell you when you're selecting a smaller pericope, here are just 2 verses, more appropriate to go into in-depth word studies, right? Because you really want to understand what these words mean in their original context, and you can draw inferences based upon that. So, with that said, the ones I'm most interested in are Barabbas, and then this robber revolutionary one, and then release is probably the one I'm next most interested in, and then finally custom, and this meant to say shout out or cry out. So let's start with Barabbas. Let's learn a little bit about his name, what that word means, all that type of stuff. So I like to just hit up Bible word study here. And we have Barabbas used 11 times all through the Gospels, not used elsewhere. That makes perfect sense, given what we know. And here's Barabbas with the original lemma.
Your life is not in your hands. Your life is in the hands of God.
Yes. Much love.
Cal Magic Guy just resubbed for 51 months. These notifications seem to be coming faster and faster.
There you go. Man, good to see you. Thanks for swinging by, Cal Magic. 51 months. Absolutely incredible. Much love to you. Let's go ahead and jump in here. We've got a lot of resources that we can look into. I like to start with DBL because to me it's the simplest. And here they're just giving you noun, proper noun, masculine, right? There's our Laonida. We could look it up directly in there, and you can see the verses that it appears in. Okay, so you're not getting too much out of the DBL. It's just giving you the basic background, and it just notes that it's a proper noun, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that as kind of our initial read. But this week, we're looking to go a little bit deeper than this, okay? So we've got Barabbas there, and let's now go Laonida. You could click this one, or you should, if I understand it correctly, you should be able to click the Laonida right here. Yeah, boom. So we get our second reference here, Barabbas. What's up, Arnold? Arnold Famini. Hello, Pastor Tanner. Can you create videos walking us through how to do exegesis and other theological processes would be helpful? Yeah, I'll definitely take a note on that on videos I could do. How to do exegesis. And other theological processes. Yeah, I'll note that for future video opportunities, Arnold, that we can do something like that. I know I haven't uploaded much recently, but I'm hoping that's going to change next year. I'm getting elders installed in my church, and we're going to be sharing a lot of the load, right? So I think that's going to be very helpful. So thanks, Arnold. I'll check it out. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for swinging by. All right, Barabbas, masculine, a prisoner released by Pilate at the request of the Jews during the trial of Jesus. And so this one is just giving you a little bit more background, right? That's not strictly lexical information. There's a little bit of dictionary information embedded in there as well, but that's great. And let's keep going. This is why we do what we do and we get the resources we get, right? So we've got DBL, we got Laonida, and now the PLGNT, right? Pocket Lexicon to the Greek New Testament. This is, I had included a bunch of different pocket dictionaries and one of these lexicons is part of that set, so not bad to have it all, especially when you have a little bit more limited library like this. Barabbas, really Jesus Barabbas. See, that's already helpful, because what am I trying to say? Jesus or Barabbas. And so I'm going to frame him up as a essentially false substitute, and the fact that his name is Jesus Barabbas is helpful for that, right? So I will actually put a note here. So there's a false Christ option here. It might be appropriate symbolically, right? Arnold says, thanks, appreciate your channel. Yes, my pleasure, Arnold. Thanks for swinging by. Appreciate you. Cal Magic says, regarding your PT Logos package, how do you keep them above the fray of all the other books? I know you probably have it solid in your memory, but do you have a suggested system, layout, etc. to help us out? Prioritization doesn't seem to be it. That's a great question, Cal Magic. So something like how to target specific resources without prioritization. I have two ideas right off the bat, Cal Magic, but with what you asked me, I'll probably turn a video into this. My first one is to do custom layouts. And my second encouragement would be to do collections. Custom layouts and collections are probably good ways to navigate the resources. But I'll probably do a video on it, honestly, because that's a really good question. All right. So I like this. We got this from our Souders Pocket Lexicon. That's nice. And let's keep going now. We've got our last two resources that I want to reference here. We've got this one, which is from Thorolf Gilbrandt, which I love. And then BDAG. Here at the medium level, we have BDAG included. So let's go ahead and go to this one and see if there's any background given to us from this resource. Word studies, the murderous insurrectionist and thief chosen by the Jews over Jesus for release by Pilate. Okay. And that's it. It doesn't go into any more detail than that. And that's fine. I am sure one of our commentaries will give us like some in-depth discussion of Barabbas and what his name means and all that type of stuff. And if it doesn't, we can definitely find more information like that, right? It's going to be possible. All right, here we go. This is from BDAG, and this might be why you keep your real in-depth resources, because we just hit 4. They give us nice surface level answers, but they didn't really give us the in-depth answers we're looking for. So this is where BDAG comes into play, right? You can see it comes from Hebrew, Bar Abba, right? So a common name, Barabbas, son of Abba, okay? Bar Abba. So, and you hear that all the time, Simon Bar Jonah, right? Different things like that. So it makes perfect sense. Bar Abba, Bar Abbas means son of Abbas, okay? So that's handy. And it continues, the prisoner released by Pilate, and it references all of the passages in the Gospels. In GHB, the Gospel according to the Hebrews, which is according to Jerome, the name was rendered in Latin, Filius Magistri Errorium, okay? Bar Rabban, okay? Origin, in Matthew commentary, Sir 121, Klostermans, found the name written in full in old manuscripts as Jesus ha Barabbas. So this gives us a little more background on what this note is meant by right here. This note from the Souders Pocket Lexicon. BDAG goes more in depth, all right? Found the name written in full in an old manuscript. So that is fascinating, okay? And then you just got some more background here. Many references against him, etc. And then associate of Paul and Barnabas, Barabbas, in Acts 15:22. Then the apostle letters. Then the apostles and the elders with the whole church decided to select a man who among them and sent them to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas, Judas called Barsabbas, and Silas, both leading men among the brothers. So that's not the one we want. So this, however, is very fascinating. And this gives us a little more background information on, okay, some manuscripts call him Jesus Barabbas, which is very interesting. So it's not only Souders Pocket Lexicon, but it's also BDAG that has this information in it. All right. Cal Magic says, I'm excited to start studying Lament using Carmen Imes' recommendation. Ordered 2 books, and God decided to mess with me. When they were delivered, I received a Gatorade sports bottle instead of my books. My immediate thought was to try and think symbolically. He gave me my first lesson in Lament. That's really cool. I love that, Cal Magic. And that's how you know we're getting our minds oriented in a different manner with the symbolic thinking. Did you pick up, Cal Magic, the latest class with Dr. Stephen Damick on, what was it? On Jubilees? I'm curious if you picked up that Jubilees class. I did pick it up. I haven't done any of the lectures yet, though. All right, so we have Barabbas there, and we've got all kind of the background on the original languages for him, okay? So that's pretty cool. Let's do one more here. I want to dig into this robber revolutionary thing, okay? Because it's obviously related to Barabbas. So let's go with Laestace in here. Robber. Laestace. Bible word study. No, I haven't yet. Still working on the others. I've got to slow down with all my other responsibilities. I completely understand, Cal Magic. Completely understand. All right, what do we have here? Well, because it's not a proper name, we actually have another hit, and that's our 3 theological dictionary of the New Testament, the abridged version, right? So glad to see that one included there. And let's see, the robber insurrectionist word, not used very often outside of the Gospels. Very interesting. So let's go ahead and grab, again, Laestace here. And let's start again with DBL. So DBL says, masculine noun, robber, bandit, Launida, robber, Launida, rebel, or revolutionary. So the Launida has 2 here. Let's go to that next. Oh, this is what we're looking for. So Laestes, 57,240, but then also Laestes, 3937. It's not Laestes, it's Stasiastes, right? From stasis, insurrection. But then you have the sub remark here, Laestes. So two kind of words used for insurrectionist or rebel here. Barabbas, who was in prison with the rebels, had committed murder in the uprising. Barabbas was an insurrectionist. There you go. Let's see if this Stasiastes is next to Laestes in Mark 15:7. Stasiaston de Menos. Where's Laestes? Oh, no, I don't see it. So let's put together two separate things. Yeah, in fact, this Stase is emphasized multiple spots. Okay, cool. So for Laonida, we're going to want to go to our first reference here. I think it's more fitting for us. Derivative of lestuo, to practice robbery or piracy, and not occurring in the New Testament. One who robs by force and violence, robber, highwayman. Anthropos, tis katabenain, apa, Jerusalem, es Iriku, Ireku, I think that's the Jews, kai leistais, periapesen. A certain man came down from Jerusalem to Jericho. No, I was wrong. It's Jericho, Iriku, and was attacked by robbers. Okay, and that's Luke 10:30. So if you want to know what this word means, go to the parable of the Good Samaritan. And that might be why people are saying robber instead of revolutionary, because if you read the parable of the Good Samaritan, you don't get a revolutionary idea. You get more of a robber or bandit idea. Okay, let's go. We did Laonida. We did DBL. Let's do Liddell Scott Jones. Okay, there's a lot of words that are similar here. Kleptes, which is thief. That's where we get our word, English word klepto from. By sea, buccaneer, right? So pirate, piracies, irregular troops. Okay, so there's lots of different ways of taking this one. Let's go here. Plunderer, robber, or false teacher, even. Wow. Okay, robber, bandit, robber. Grammatical forms. Classical Greek, the term is related to the verb ledzamai, to gain as plunder, and does not unconditionally imply lack of honesty. It's used of soldiers who, according to the custom of antiquity, were permitted to plunder their victims. So just like a typical act, right? The sort of thing that they would do. It does, however, favor the bad sense, and it enjoys a special place in reference to pirates and buccaneers. Cross-reference Liddell Scott Jones, right? Significantly, Josephus applied the term consistently to the zealot party of Judaism who hoped to violently overthrow their Roman oppressors. So there you go. That's how you get to the link of your Jewish freedom fighter, right? It's through Josephus. Rengstorff also notes that rabbinic Judaism may have borrowed the term in similar fashion, referring to the zealots. This term can also mean robber. Well, boom. Locked in. How valuable is that resource, y'all? I told you guys. Pulling that one out is excellent. I like that. Septuagint usage. Out of 4 instances of Laestes in the Septuagint with Hebrew originals, 3 Hebrew terms are used: bandits, robbers, and invaders, right? So that's just a variety of usage. New International Version's translation is the invaders one. Inherent to each of these is the idea of a violent, forceful action, whether stealing or plundering. The apocryphal letter of Jeremiah further confirms such nuances of violence. It conjoins it with war. Okay. And then New Testament usage. Man, what a good resource. New Testament usage, except for one instance of 2 Corinthians 11:26, bandits, Laestes occurs exclusively in the Gospels. Each of the synoptic evangelists makes considerable point of the fact that Jesus was not a Laestes, that is to say, he was never regarded as a thief or a robber. Rather, what is at stake for them is an understanding of Laestes similar to Josephus and rabbinic Judaism. Jesus was in no way a political zealot. Those who crucified him charged him with that crime and executed him as such. The denouncement of such a misconception of Jesus' mission is lucid. The soldiers did not need swords to take Jesus as they would a violent insurrectionist. Elsewhere, we are given clues that Jesus' kingdom is neither earthly nor political. The hierarchy, however, accused him of subverting the nation, inciting rebellion. The description of Barabbas in John as a lay stace is telling. Here we see evidence that Barabbas, described as in prison with the insurrectionists by Mark, was actually a political prisoner, a zealot-type bandit rather than a common thief. Jesus himself rejected all such violent messiahs. The people, however, chose such a one in the person of Barabbas instead of the true Messiah, Jesus. Bing, 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 bing. This is what I wanted to get to with comparing these two figures, right? There's this false Messiah thing. And this Messiah establishes his rule through worldly means, whereas Jesus does not. The irony continues in that Jesus was crucified between two lestai who were under the same sentence as he. The religious leadership is characterized as having completely misinterpreted Jesus' mission and purpose to establish God's kingdom, the rule of God in the lives of men and women. They themselves are the real lestai, who have forced the holy temple of God to become a den for their own merchandising, i.e. plundering of God's people. The true believer will recognize the thieves and robbers who would try to lead children of God away. These invaders bring death and destruction. Only Jesus brings life. Pretty handy. I mean, come on, guys. How good a resource is this? So now we're already getting the idea of false Messiah versus true Messiah. Who are the lestai or lestes? Right? These are themes that we can preach on. And they took one over the other. Yeah, very cool. All right, let's go to the Theological Dictionary of New Testament Abridged and see where this lestes comes from. It says, from the root meaning to win, to seize, come words for prey, and to seize is prey, and hence lestes for those who seizes prey. The word is used in antiquity for a soldier or mercenary who has implicit right to booty, but it usually has a bad sense, e.g. for undisciplined troops than for robbers, bandits, etc., with an implied use of force. Josephus uses the term for the zealots, who under such leaders as Hezekiah and Judas of Galilee revolt against Roman rule, with perhaps messianic pretensions. For many Jews, the zealots are patriots rather than bandits, even though they often take what they need from their own people. But Josephus takes the Roman view, for although the Romans execute the zealots as political offenders by crucifixion, they contemptuously describe them as bandits. It is interesting that Josephus does not use lestai for the Jews as a whole when they rebel in AD 66, but reserves the term for zealot individuals and factions that, in his view, misuse the religious cause. So again, Josephus' insight here, quite helpful. Rabbinic Judaism adopts the term lestes and lesteia from the Greek and used them both for robbers and originally perhaps for the zealots, which suggests that the zealots themselves regard the term of reproach as a title of honor, but also that the rabbis to some degree repudiated them. In the New Testament, in 2 Corinthians 11:26, Paul used the term while listing the perils to which he was subject. He had bandits in mind, all right, and that's the only place outside the Gospels I think it's used. In Matthew 21:13, Jesus accuses the priestly aristocracy of turning the house of prayer into a den of robbers. He then has in view the temple trade, which serves personal enrichment and satisfies cupidity. The saying brings the priesthood under the threat and judgment of Jeremiah 7:8. You know what this makes me think? It makes me think a better translation is robber, not revolutionary, robber. And I think that's the case because you can see in each of these locations, bandits and robbers are thought of, right? So it might be a little bit anachronistic to take Josephus' rendering and read it back into the Gospels in some of the translations. So I don't know. I don't know about the two translations that use the term revolutionary. Doesn't feel right to me. In Luke 10:30 and 35, the lestai are probably bandits, but they could also be zealots who preyed on the population in self-support. If they are zealots, the parable perhaps contains an indirect criticism of the zealot movement. And the use of the term is similar in John 10:1, where it covers those, including zealots, who try to bring in the kingdom without regard for Jesus and who thus bring the flock into serious danger. The saying of Jesus to those who arrest him in Matthew 26:55 carries a clear messianic reference. To reject the claim of Jesus is to rank him with zealot leaders. Pilate, indeed, lets the people choose between the freedom fighter Barabbas, whose first name was probably Jesus, and Jesus of Nazareth, as though they are both men of the same stamp. Where Barabbas is called a lestes, or in some versions an archelestes, two lestai are also crucified with Jesus. The title on the cross identifies Jesus as a zealot leader, although handed over by his own people. He is one whom the people rejects. This explains why Celsus later calls Jesus a lestes, a false messiah. End quote. Honestly, great section here from the Theological Dictionary, New Testament, Abridged Kittel. Nice. So, crucified between lestes. So there's a lot here in terms of Jesus being compared to lestes and it being a false comparison. Fantastic. All right, we got great information there out of the original language. So you could obviously multiply this, do further study in original languages. We could pick any of these other words that we identified as valuable, do Bible word studies on them, pull up each of the individual lexicons, etc. But you get the picture, right? We looked into Barabbas. We picked probably the best word for us to dig into, lestes here. And this is really going to frame up at least our exegetical outline, if not our homiletical outline as well. This idea of the lestes being released, the false lestes and the true lestes, etc. So we got a lot done on the original language front, right? We already looked up textual variants. In textual criticism, we saw that they are negligible from the resource that we consulted. So there's no need for us to go any further in terms of textual criticism. And so that's it for kind of like the original language study and digging into, you know, those individual pieces, right? So fantastic. We got lots of information there. Let me look at, just in brief, I want to look at my previous notes here and look at what I had studied in them prior to that. This is all information that had come to mind while I was prepping. Okay, this is the original language stuff we had looked into, keywords. Those are all the keywords we had looked into last time. Aletheia we decided was going to be like the root of our word. And then we did some Bible dictionaries, right? So we did Bible dictionaries on Aletheia. And that's before we put together our exegetical outline utilizing our commentaries. So that's perfect. Let's go ahead and grab some Bible dictionaries now. And we will utilize our Bible dictionaries to look up the thief/revolutionary concept. We got a lot already in our theological dictionary, but let's do a Bible dictionary and see what we get. So let's just grab Factbook. I think that's a great way to just grab this whole thing. And let's go with Barabbas again and see if there's any additional information on the person of Barabbas in a man accused of insurrection in Jerusalem. And see if they're on the person of Barabbas, instead of looking up his name in particular in Greek, let's see if our Bible dictionaries have anything to say, right? So in this set, I added the ISBE 1915 edition. And so before, we would only have this, and this, which are good. But moving into the medium from the small, I also added the ISBE. And I think this is going to give us more in-depth information, right? And you can see all these other ones are locked. Giovanno, Pastor Tanner, what do you think about the counseling guide in Factbook? I haven't used it much, Giovanno. I know what you're talking about. And this library that I've put together here is not primarily used for counseling, but we can try it. So fear as a counseling topic, right? No, they've got as a preaching theme here. I might not even have it unlocked in this one. I'd have to be on my main account, my primary. So yeah, just to put it simple, Giovanno, I haven't really looked at it that much. I remember when we first got it, I was very excited to get it, and I used it a little bit and just fiddled around with it. I liked it, but I haven't used it in like a sustained manner, and maybe because I've forgotten about it, right? I certainly use, you know what I use more is the smart search function. I'll smart search my library for certain counseling topics, and then I will find how to deal with those counseling topics from individual books that get pulled up. But I haven't used the counseling guide itself very much. That's honestly a recommendation I should probably follow. Thanks for the reminder. Good question. All right, let's start with Easton's. We'll do Easton's, and then we'll do Lexham Bible, then we'll do New Bible, and then finally we'll do ISBE. Okay, Easton says, Barabbas, son of Abba, or of a father, right? Because Abba means father. A notorious robber whom Pilate proposed to condemn to death instead of Jesus, whom he wished to release in accordance with the Roman custom. But the Jews were so bent on the death of Jesus, they demanded that Barabbas should be pardoned. This Pilate did. Okay, so that's like a good just background on Easton's. So let's get that in here. And now what we're doing with this is we're not going to like original language. We're just going to our Bible dictionaries. Let's try Lexham now. Barabbas. Ooh, look how good Lexham is. Nice. Let's read this whole thing. Barabbas, prisoner held by Pilate at the same time as Jesus, released after the crowd calls for his freedom and Jesus' crucifixion. Each of the Gospels describes Barabbas differently. John contains the least detail concerning Barabbas, referring to Barabbas as a robber or revolutionary, and that goes to the translation issue we'd been talking about this whole time. In Matthew 27:16, Barabbas is a notorious prisoner. In Mark 15:7, Barabbas is a rebel or an insurrectionist, and Luke 23:19, he has been part of an insurrection. This might be, remember I said earlier that I didn't think that translating it as revolutionary was a good translation, because the word more properly in other places looked like it'd be better translated as robber. Well, it might not be an anachronism taken from Josephus. Instead, it might be a harmonization on the part of the translators. So you might have the translators harmonizing the Gospels a little bit in this as well. So just another thought I had. In Mark 15:7, Barabbas is a rebel or an insurrectionist. Luke 23:19, he has been part of an insurrection. Mark and Luke both mention that Barabbas has committed murder. Pilate may have used Barabbas to gauge how unpopular or dangerous Jesus was. Barabbas may have been an alternate name for Jesus. Rig, Barabbas, Maccabee, Jesus, and Barabbas. So these are going to be really good to reference articles, perhaps. And again, we may not have those resources in this package, but those are definitely things that you would look up if you had more opportunity. Barabbas means son of the father. And that's what I was asking about. Bar Abba, son of the father. Oh my goodness. It means son of the father. And so yet again, he's a pseudo Christ. He's a Christ son of God, pseudonymous, not pseudonymous. He's a fake son of God, right? Son of the Father. And he's called Jesus Barabbas in some ancient copies of Matthew. The gospel writers could have used similar names to contrast two characters. Jesus is the true son of the Father, the true liberator, and the true revolutionary. Ah, fascinating. The Gospels may also use Barabbas to lessen Pilate's guilt for crucifying Jesus. Mark and Luke portray Barabbas as an insurrectionist and murderer, but they do not show Pilate trying to determine how dangerous Jesus is. Barabbas is clearly the more dangerous. Pilate reduces his responsibility and says, why? What evil has Jesus done? The crowd takes responsibility for Jesus' death, and Pilate can claim that he is innocent of Jesus' blood. The Gospels mention the tradition of releasing a prisoner in honor of the Passover. Thus, Pilate gives the Jewish crowd an opportunity to free Jesus. They choose a criminal instead. No other ancient source mentions this tradition. The Gospels disagree as to whether the tradition is Roman or Jewish. Because John says it's a Jewish tradition, not a Roman one. Parallels in other ancient literature, the Barabbas storyline may serve as a scapegoat narrative. One is set free, and another, in this case, Jesus, carries the burdens of the community. Such narratives were present in both Jewish and Greek traditions. Oh, this is another good one. Yes, this reminds me of, who wrote, René Girard. He wrote I See Satan Fall Like Lightning. He talks about the scapegoat a lot. We got to look Girard up and see what Girard says about this. Oh, man, how good Lexham Bible Dictionary, y'all. Barabbas storyline may serve as a scapegoat narrative. One is set free, and another, in this case, Jesus, carries the burdens of the community. Such narratives were present in both Jewish and Greek traditions. McLean, Barabbas the scapegoat ritual. Roger David Oss proposes that this story parallels Josephus' account of Archelaus' release of a prisoner, the story of Esther in the Hebrew Bible. However, this interpretation is criticized for putting Judaism in service to Christianity. Cool. Wow. Lots of great info here. Fantastic. Fantastic. Lexham Bible Dictionary. Absolute fire. So now we want to look up Scapegoat Narrative with Rene Girard. And then Archelaus / Esther, son of the father. Son of the father. That's his name. Archelaus / Esther, CLBD. And then also Scapegoat, see the Old Testament, and Rene Girard. Man, tons of food for thought in the Lexham Bible Dictionary. Let's now do the New Bible Dictionary. See what it's got. A bandit arrested for homicidal political terrorism. Mark's language could indicate a well-known incident, and the epithet notable some reputation as a species of hero. The priest, possibly taking up an initial demand from his supporters, engineered a movement for his release to counter Pilate's intended offer of that of Jesus. And Barabbas became an exemplification of the effects of substitutionary atonement. The name is patronymic, son of Abba. It occurs as Jesus Barabbas in some authorities in Matthew 27:16, and origin in location notes. This reading is ancient. It adds pungency to Pilate's offer, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus Christ. But however attractive, this must remain uncertain. The privilege of the release of a prisoner at Passover time is independently attested by Mark and John, but remains obscure. Blinzler associates it with Mishnah Peshaim 8:6, which ordains that a Passover lamb may be offered for one for whom they have promised to bring out of prison. So that would be going with John, that it's a Jewish custom. Jesus Barabbas or Jesus Christ. Uncertain. New Bible Dictionary. Perfect. And we'll do the final one now, guys. This is ISBE. And again, the 1915, they have both, but the 1915 is just much more cost effective. And you guys know me. I want to get you the value. So let's do ISBE. And this is why I did it. Look how thorough the entry is, right? Probably the most thorough entry, or right up there with the Lexham Bible Dictionary. All right, Barabbas, for Aramaic, Barabba equals literally son of the father, i.e. the master, or i.e. of the master or teacher. Abba in the time of Jesus was perhaps a title of honor, but became later a proper name. The variant Barabban, found in the Heraclean Syriac, would mean son of the rabbi or teacher. Origen knew and did not absolutely condemn a reading of Matthew 27:16 and 17, which gave the name Jesus Barabbas. So we didn't know about the does not absolutely condemn. But although it is found in a few cursives and in the Aramaic and the Jerus Syriac VSS versions, in this place only, it is probably due to a scribe's error in the transcription. If the name was simply Barabbas or Barabban, it may still, and this I believe is just the accusative version of the same, it may still have meant that the man was a rabbi's son, or it may have been a purely conventional proper name signifying nothing. He was the criminal chosen by the Jerus mob at the instigation of the priests in the preference to Jesus Christ for Pilate to release on the Feast of Passover. Matthew calls him a notable or a notorious prisoner. Mark says that he was bound with him that made the insurrection, men who in the insurrection had committed murder. Luke stated that he was cast in prison for a certain insurrection made in the city and for murder, and John calls him a robber or a brigand. Nothing further is known of him, nor of the insurrection in which he took part. Luke's statement that he was a murderer is probably a deduction from Mark's more circumstantial statement that he was only one of a gang who, in a rising, had committed murder. Whether robbery was the motive of this crime, as John suggests, or whether he was a man who had raised a revolt against the Roman power, Gould, cannot be decided. But it seems equally improbable that the priests and the pro-Roman party would urge the release of a political prisoner and that Pilate would grant it, especially when the former was urging and the latter could not resist the execution of Jesus on a political charge. The insurrection may have been a notorious case of brigandage. To say that the Jews would not be interested in the release of such a prisoner is to forget the history of mobs. The custom referred to of the releasing of a prisoner at Passover is otherwise unknown. What Matthew and John represent as both as brought about by Pilate, Mark makes to appear as if it was suggested by the people themselves. An unessential variation, Meyer. For a view of the incident as semi-legendary growth, see Schmeidel, also Allen, Matthew, and Gould, Mark, etc. So lots of information you can see here, and really supplements, what we got in some of the other locations. I still will give the nod to the Lexham Bible Dictionary for bringing up some stuff that none of these other ones brought up, but you can see the ISBE especially offers its kind of own unique take on the situation. All right, so there we are. That's our Bible dictionaries, and we were able to look up a very important figure he's going to be essential to understand about when we get into the preaching of the actual sermon. So now that we've done that, we want to start outlining the text. And I've noted that we added an additional resource here in the Medium library, the Medium study bundle here. We've added an additional resource to help us with our outline. So we're going to use our Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible and our Outline Bible by Wilmington. Both of these are going to help us get a good outline. Now, I will say we selected such a small pericope. There's not too much needed in terms of an outline, but I still wanted to include it. Okay. So you can see here the Outline Bible. They give it a small subsection under this entire section of trials, etc. And it's just this: Pilate and the Jews' second encounter. So he's got Pilate, talks about releasing King of Jews. No, not this man, but Barabbas. All right. If we were in a larger pericope, these outlines would be really, really helpful. As is, this one is, very basic, but it's part of the process to derive a good exegetical outline. And so the Outline Bible and the Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible are both going to help you do that. And this is actually a job for our passage guide. So just pull up our passage guide, commentaries, and our Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible. There's our Outline Bible, and right here is what we're looking for. And so what is his outline? Jesus was led in the palace or judgment hall. This goes all the way back to 28, so you got to go further down. And here's what he has. Movement 3, back to the people to declare Jesus innocent. And Pilate's first attempt to release Jesus, he offers a substitute, the mob's choice, a man of the world. So, again, this is actually a pretty good outline to give us exactly what we're looking for, because we can see the substitute nature. So, movement 3, back to the people to declare Jesus' innocence. A, Pilate's first attempt to release Jesus offers a substitute. B, the mob's choice, a man of the world. So again, that's pretty handy just right there like that. Okay, that's the Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible. So we've got a couple of exegetical outlines, very, very basic. We don't need to go much more in depth than that. Homiletical outlines will come as we decide to work through the text and through the commentaries. So we don't need to fill that in just yet. Now that we've got our homiletical outlines, we've consulted the original languages and the lexicons. We've also looked into our Bible dictionaries. Now we have our opportunity to start digging into our commentaries, okay? And, at this point, if you were so inclined, if you weren't as busy and all that type of stuff, you might want to start trying to do the exegesis yourself and coming up with all these independent, technical ideas and concepts, and that's perfectly valid and appropriate. But again, I'm trying to show off the resources in the library. A lot of personal exegetical work is the sort of thing you do as you just kind of stare at the text, think about it, ask questions of the text, all that type of stuff. And although that'd be an interesting video, it doesn't illustrate what I'm trying to illustrate in terms of the resources available in the library. So I'm not going to reference that. So we are now at the point where digging into the commentaries to have a good understanding of what the commentaries have to say is the direction we want to go. So we will now move to our passage guide. And I am going to highlight in particular resources that are added in the medium bundle here. I am not going to be grabbing resources that are already in the small bundle, at least at first. Okay, so what do we get in? Let me clean some of this up. I just have a lot of lingering stuff. So let's clean all this up. And of course, you can also go to the comments in this one. Right here, you can see commentary stuff, but I love the Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible for the outlines in particular. Okay, we've got that. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, done with all that. Now, what are new resources that you have in the Medium study bundle that you didn't have in the other ones? Well, we've got the Life Application Bible Commentary. We've got Pillar. Okay. We've got the Bible Knowledge Commentary is newly added. We had the NBC last time. The Catena Aria is newly added. The ACCS is newly added. The Bible Knowledge Background Commentary, newly added. McLaren, Alexander McLaren's. The Exegetical Summaries. RCS. The Sermon Outline Bible. Don't overlook this one, guys. It's a good, it's a good one. I think the Summarized Bible was on the last one. I think I remember going into this before, but we'll just pull it up. And then the IVP Bible Background Commentary. Look how much more beefed up this study bundle is on the commentaries. Now you're getting a robust treatment. You see what I mean? Like, we took the Tyndale that we offered in the last one and we just like tripled, quadrupled down. Notice that we took what you got in the study Bible, the Ancient Faith Study Bible, and we quadrupled down on it. The Catena, the ACCS, the RCS, and the Sermon Outline Bible are all there to give you collations of information, okay? So we've got you more background information. We've got you another single volume commentary. We've got the exegetical summaries, right? And then we've got serious collations available in addition to Pillar, which offers another fantastic, more exegetical work. So we really tried to do a solid by you guys on the set, and we added the application commentary as well. So that's what this is all about. Let's go ahead and start digging through these. And I want to start with, let's do the Bible background commentaries. Let's do the Bible background commentaries, followed by the exegetical summary, and then we'll start getting into all the extra. Then we'll do our single volume, and then we'll do our collations. Okay. So first, our background commentaries. This is the original IVP BBC. This is the second edition for New Testament, but this is the one like I had first been given from a buddy of mine when I was in college. All right. So the IVP Bible background commentary is a classic. All right. I'm out of tea, but man, it's good tea. Lasted us a long time. All right. 39. Roman governors were not obligated to follow local or other customs, but out of political prudence often did so, especially at crowded festivals. Well-liked precedents, like pardons, were usually kept. Although unattested in extant Palestinian sources, as are many customs, the specific custom mentioned here is the sort of custom the Romans would have allowed. Roman law officially permitted two kinds of amnesty: the indulgentia, pardoning a condemned person, and, closer to what Pilate probably has in mind here, the abolitio, acquitting a person before judgment. Romans and Greeks seem to have granted mass amnesty at some other regular feasts, and Romans occasionally acquitted prisoners in response to the cries of the crowd. So that's great background information on why this is even an option, right? So we'll call this one a background commentary. And this one's the IVP, BBC. Boom. And then verse 40, the term translated bandit or robber could mean what those titles usually imply. Or, in light of Josephus' usage, could imply that Barabbas is a revolutionary. There you go. I said I thought that was a bit anachronistic, but It could also be, what's the other conclusion I came to on anachronism? Oh, not only that, it could be a harmonization on the part of the translators, right? A point clear in Mark 15:7. Some warn that it is difficult to distinguish between self-seeking bandits and those desiring only to terrorize foreigners. In either case, Barabbas was the kind of person Rome would want to execute. Many ancient writers used irony. The irony here cuts deeply. The people preferred a real revolutionary to Jesus, who was denounced for treason as a would-be king, but had no actual record of participation in insurrection. Judean leaders on other occasions used loud delegations to force governors to accept their demands. So again, great background here. And I'm going to put the irony. Real insurrectionist favored over accused insurrection. All right. That was one background commentary. Let's grab the other one. So this is the Bible Knowledge background commentary with Craig Evans as the editor. When this originally came out, I was ecstatic because we had something that is in addition to the IVP version, okay? And the Bible Knowledge commentary is on its own. The non-background version is really good already. And so to be able to get the background commentary as well, awesome. So here, the pericope treated is much larger than the current one we're working in. So we just need to scroll down a little bit further. That's when he's flogged. And here we go. We can see there's verse 40 and 39 to 40 right here. Bible Knowledge commentary is great. I agree, Giovanno. When Pilate rejoins the Sanhedrin emissaries, he proclaims Jesus' innocence. I find no crime in him. Having given this verdict, which is repeated 2 more times, the deeper question for Pilate is whether he will act on the truth he has seen. He does not see a man here who threatens Rome. Jesus does not qualify as a terrorist. He therefore appeals to a tradition of Passover amnesty in which one prisoner was released during the festival. While we have no extra biblical evidence for this, the synoptics described it as a practice of Pilate or of the governor generally. John says that he was a valued Jewish custom, thus placing the outcome of the amnesty entirely in the Sanhedrin's hands. Pilate ironically referred to Jesus as king of the Jews, and it is difficult to interpret his motive. By bringing up the amnesty, it is clear that Pilate wants to have Jesus released, and by using this title, he is endorsing it as something that is meaningless to Rome. But John and his readers can see it as a true identification of who Jesus is. The scene closes with the crowd calling instead for the release of Barabbas. While Jesus was no political threat to Rome, Barabbas was. Aelestes, referred to a violent men who could rob, such as the Samaritan parable, or fight in uprisings. Josephus uses the term for zealot leaders. Such a person was a guerrilla fighter, or as the Romans would view him, a terrorist. Mark adds just this ominous detail. Barabbas had been caught killing someone in the uprising. Therefore, a man who was a genuine threat to Rome, with demonstrated tendencies towards violence, was poised to go free. Jesus, on the other hand, a man in whom there is no danger, whose followers will not fight, remains in custody. So boom. We didn't get anything super in additional here, but what it does do is confirms some of the studies that we had already found, which was excellent because we see, man, we're on the right track with where we're going here. So let's just scroll a little bit further down. And this is not the IVP, but instead we have the Bible Knowledge background commentary and some good notes there. Okay, so that's our background commentary. Now, I want to let's get into our single volume first. No, let's do this. Let's do our summarized, then our single volume. So we'll do this order. Summarized, single volume with the new Bible Knowledge background commentary. Then we'll do our collations, okay, of which we have many. So collation here. Then we have our Catena collation. Then we have our ACCS. Then we'll take the RCS. Then we will finally, after our collations are done, we will go with the exegetical summaries. Follow that with pillar. Oh man, what did I do? Oh, I grabbed the whole tab on accident. Follow that up with pillar. And then life application, and we'll do McLaren if we have time. Okay. But just going to highlight some of these resources for you guys. Okay, Summarized Bible, chapter 18, Jesus' betrayal and arrest, Peter's denial, Jesus condemned, and Barabbas released. So it gives you all the characters, and I just like that these give quick summaries of chapters. It probably won't be a helpful resource for us with this study, and it's because we're only grabbing 2 verses. So we have a really small section of the narrative here. But let's just look at the last one. Yeah, nothing here for us, but that's okay. Now let's go to our single volume Bible Knowledge Commentary. Having displayed a lack of interest in truth, so now we're getting into less background and word studies, and you're going to start seeing some more exegetical thoughts in here. And of course, once we get into our collations, you're going to start seeing some more good quotes and then homiletical thoughts that they might really spark your imagination when it comes to developing your own sermon and the things that you're going to want to bring out, right? Having displayed a lack of interest in the truth, Pilate then revealed his lack of commitment to justice. Okay, that's handy. He lacked the courage of his convictions. If Jesus was innocent of all charges, then Pilate should have set him free. Instead, Pilate began a series of compromising moves to avoid dealing with an inconvenient truth in a difficult circumstance. First, when Pilate found out Jesus was from Galilee, he sent him to Herod. Second, Pilate tried to appeal to the crowd, hoping to bypass the desire of the chief priests and the elders. Knowing Jesus was popular, he thought the crowd would prefer Jesus to Barabbas, but the leaders proved to be persuasive. The offer to release Barabbas, who was guilty of murder and insurrection, shows poor judgment from a person responsible for Rome's interests. So this is Bible Knowledge Commentary. One of the things that I think is interesting here is I have not preached on criticizing Pilate entirely. I preached on Pilate yesterday, but I'm going to have Pilate pops up again in chapter 19. And so I probably should have like a full treatment of Pilate. And, in that one, I should maybe bring up this quote or these ideas, right? So I'm going to put this in here as well for future reference. But let's go back to what we just were doing. So you do that pretty easily if you're considering you come across something that may not be valuable yet, but might be in the future. You can easily just create a new notes document and put it in there. Okay. All right, our collations now. So my understanding of W. Robertson Nicoll is, if you look, this is an older resource. 1958. Okay, so it's not old, but it's public domain. And see, that might be the latest printing. It might be public domain from long before then. Anyway, it's a little bit older resource, but I love it because he does collations of like different sermons from pastors or preachers who talked about these things. So notice here, he has references to Bishop Harvey Goodwin in his parish sermons. Then he has references to Spurgeon, right? Or Lightfoot. So I love Robertson Nicoll because he's got these little chunks here that you're getting good stuff from pastors, preachers of the day. And so verse 40 here, look, he gets all these references here to 1840, and he's kind of summarizing the ideas, okay, coming from Spurgeon, coming from Stanford, the contemporary pulpit, Thursday penny pulpit, etc. And so again, this is the sort of thing where, man, what a cool resource to have in Logos. And it's one just a lot of people don't know about. And so I'm really glad I was able to get it added to the Medium library, Medium study bundle, because I really love its notes. And oftentimes they're of the sort that you're not going to get elsewhere. So let's see what it says. Not this man, but Barabbas. The narrative of Jesus' arraignment before the civil power in Jerusalem affords the most vivid illustration in the New Testament of just 2 great moral lessons. Pilate's behavior shows the wicked wrong of indecision, and the chief priest's choice of Barabbas shows the utter ruin of a wrong decision. See, that also goes to our new note, right? And you can see we're going to preach one sermon that's focused on the wrong decision of the Jews, but Pilate needs to be touched on later, right? So, the moral of the scene turns on the willful choice made by these two leaders, the real and the pretended Christ. The whole story is often repeated even in these modern times. It will be well to bear in mind that the decision is offered and made between Jesus and Barabbas whenever the Lord of Glory is represented in a principle, in an institution, in a truth, in a person. Ding, 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 ding. This is what I want to preach a sermon about, right? Is in your own life, choose Jesus over Barabbas, right? The secret of the absurd choice published that day so vociferously when the miscreant impostor came to the front is found in the fact that the people did not choose for him at all, but chose against Christ. They would not have this man to reign over them. It is not true always that men love the evil they seem to clamor for. In many instances, the explanation of their apparent preference is found in simple hatred of the truth which confronts them. Perfect. Our two lessons appear now plainly. We see the wicked wrong of indecision. We are agreed that Pilate wished to let Jesus go, but when he gave him up in spite of the murderers, he himself shared the crime. His name is put in the Apostles' Creed that all Christendom might hold it in everlasting fame of infamy. Wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this that this man hath done told for memorial of him, which is horrible, right, for him. Okay. And then two, we see finally the utter ruin of wrong decision. Goethe commences the 5th book of his autobiography with these somewhat discouraging words. Every bird has its decoy, and every man is led and misled in a way peculiar to himself. Ding, 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 ding. How good is that, right? We might take that very quote. We need not pause to discuss here the width of application such a statement might have. It was true of Pontius Pilate. It was true of that infuriated crowd clamoring for Barabbas before Christ. So good. Look at that. And again, you may not have even thought to reference Nickel at this point. Fantastic information. Love to see that. Okay, so that's one collation. Let's go now to the Catena. Oh, I was like, this isn't what the Catena looks like. Here we go. So my understanding is Catena is a collation put together by Thomas Aquinas on the Gospels. And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and said to them, I find no fault at all, but ye have a custom, blah, 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 blah. So here's the text. And here are the individuals who are referenced. Augustine, after Pilate asked, what is truth? He remembered a custom of the Jews, releasing one prisoner at Passover. He did not wait for Christ's answer for fear of losing the chance to save him, which he much wished to do. And when he said this, he went out again to the Jews. So, not too helpful. Chrysostom, he knew that this question required time to answer. It was necessary immediately to rescue him from the fury of the Jews, so he went out. Chrysostom probably following in Augustine's footsteps there. Alcuin, or he did not wait to hear the reply because he was unworthy to hear it. Interesting different take, but they're all noting the fact that he went quickly. Okay. Saith unto him, I find no fault in him, etc. We probably don't need this either, but let's read it. Chrysostom, he did not say he has sinned and is worthy of death, yet release him at the feast, but acquitting him in the first place, he does more than he needed to do, and asks it as a favor, that if they are unwilling to let him go as innocent, they will at any rate allow him the benefit of the season. And I just thought, guys, I need to put a note for myself here to reference Nickel for what I wanted to bring up. True challenge put to us in time immemorial. Perfect. Scroll back down. Let's call this Katina. Here you go. But ye have a custom that I shall release him unto you at the Passover. Venerable Beatty says the custom was not commanded in the law, but has been handed down by tradition from the old fathers, vis-a-vis that in remembrance of their deliverance out of Egypt, they should release a prisoner at the Passover. So this is good background because perhaps Beatty's the only one who's going to tell us where this came from, because almost every other commentary you've seen has said, no, we don't know where this custom came from, right? Well, even if Beatty's wrong, at least we can reference to people, hey, here's one take by an early church father on it. Pilate tried to persuade them, will ye therefore release the king of the Jews? Augustine. He could not dismiss this idea from his mind that Jesus was king of the Jews, as if the truth itself, whom he had just asked what it is, had inscribed it there as a title. So Augustine commenting on the fact that he calls him king of the Jews, even to the Jews, right? Which is very interesting. Theophylact, Pilate is judicious in replying that Jesus had done nothing wrong, and that there was no reason to suspect him of aiming at a kingdom, for they might be sure that if he set himself up as a king and as a rival of the Roman Empire, a Roman prefect would not release him. When then he says, will ye that I release unto you the king of the Jews, he clears Jesus of all guilt and mocks the Jews, as if to say, him whom ye accuse of thinking himself a king, the same I bid you release. He does no such thing. And then finally, Augustine. Oh no, there's a couple more here. Upon this they cry out and said, not this man, but Barabbas. We blame you not, O Jews, for releasing a guilty man at the Passover, but for killing an innocent one. Yet unless this were done, it were not the true Passover. Beatty, inasmuch as they abandoned the Savior and sought out a robber, to this day the devil practices his robberies upon them. And then Alcuin, the name Barabbas signifies the son of their master, i.e. the devil, his master in his wickedness, the Jews in their perfidy. So you can see, one take would be that these early church fathers are relatively anti-Semitic. It's not a required read, and we've talked before in the Gospel of John about how John often talks about the Pharisees, the Sadducees, etc., as the Jews, right? That's just his language that he uses. It doesn't necessarily require any anti-Semitism per se. But you have all that here. Okay, perfect. That's the Katina. Now we go to the ACCS, which is going to have some similars to the Katina, but is obviously going to be a little bit more in-depth at points and have more information, right? So he's got a lot here. Yeah, fantastic. Really good options. See what it says. Pilate goes the extra mile from Chrysostom. Consider how prudentially Pilate acted. He did not say, since he sinned and is deserving of death, forgive him on account of the feast. Rather, having first acquitted him of all guilt, Pilate goes the extra mile and asks them if they're willing to allow the benefit of the season, even if they're unwilling to let him go as an innocent. So notice it's the same one that we saw in the Katina, just better worded. Custom found in Numbers 35. Cyril seems to indicate that that's where the custom comes from. Very interesting. As I was considering and meditating in my mind how the custom arose for the Jews to ask for one man to be released to them, a robber it might be, or a murderer, the idea occurred to me that they no longer regulated their actions according to the law, but choosing rather to use their own customs, they fell into a decayed state of manners, not altogether in agreement with the law of Moses. But while I was searching the divine scriptures and hunting everywhere for the origin of this custom, I came on one of the divine dictates that caused me to suspect that when the Jews sought the release of a malefactor, they were, in fact, in however mistaken a way, fulfilling one of the customs of the law. Wow, this is very interesting. At the end of the book, called Numbers, we find recorded the law concerning voluntary and involuntary homicide. When the penalty in the case of premeditated murder has been clearly laid down, the book goes on to speak of involuntary homicide, and after other remarks, makes the following declaration. But if he stabbed him suddenly without enmity, or hurled anything on him without lying in wait, or used a stone by which a man may die, and without seeing him cast it on him so that he died, though he was not his enemy and did not seek his harm, then the congregation shall judge between the manslayer and the avenger of blood, and the congregation shall restore him to the city of his refuge to which he had fled. Since this was the written commandment when any, as it happened, were involved in such a calamity, the Jews, when they were congregated together, and so that they might not appear altogether to neglect this enactment, sought the release of one of them. For the law laid down that it was to be the act of the entire assembly. Since then they were permitted by the law to ask for the release of a prisoner, they make this request to Pilate. For after they had once accepted the Roman yoke, From then on, they were for the most part ruled by their laws and the administration of their affairs. We might even say further that although it was lawful for them to put to death anyone convicted of a crime, they brought Jesus to Pilate as a criminal, saying, "It is not lawful for us to put any man to death." For though they alleged as a plea their purification of the sacrifice of the Passover, yet they showed themselves flatterers of Rome in entrusting to the laws of the Romans the duty that the divine commandment of heaven laid upon them. So this is a really fascinating take, and you can see Cyril of Alexandria here gives us even a little peek behind the curtain as to his like study process and what he's interested in and all that type of stuff. So I find this very, very interesting, but it's kind of in depth and takes away from the primary purpose of what we've landed on in terms of our preaching. So I'm going to leave it out, unfortunately, but I think it's a really interesting idea that Cyril has landed on here. Let's go to Origen. Is a similar custom in the church possible? Origen. Do not wonder that the Roman government, holding sway over the Jews who had recently become their subjects, thought it was appropriate to grant them something acceptable at the Feast of Passover. They allowed them to ask for anyone they wanted to be freed, even though he might appear guilty of many murders. For in this way, nations sometimes grant favors to those whom they have conquered until their rule is established. Yet this custom of releasing a prisoner existed at one time among the Jews also. Let us inquire whether anything like this may take place also in God's judgment, where the whole church may ask for any sinner to be released from the condemnation of sin, especially if, while having other evil works, he is eager to do good for the church. I think this is an over, I don't know, it's a bit of an over allegorization, right? And I'm not prone to criticizing anyone on allegorizing the text, but the idea that we release a prisoner who has been condemned for murder is equivalent to releasing a Christian from condemnation of sin, to me is just a bit of a stretch, although it might have scapegoat ideas. So let's include it, and then we might have to put it under scapegoat ideas, right? So as I talked through it, I was reminded of the scapegoat ideas that we had seen, and it might have a place there. So see Old Testament and Rene Girard. See also Origen in ACCS. So I take it back. That might have value. Okay. Let's keep going here. Release King of the Jews. Augustine. It could not, however, be torn from Pilate's heart that Jesus was the King of the Jews, but it was inscribed there, as in the superscription, the truth itself about which he had just inquired. Pilate speaks in jest. When he called Jesus King of the Jews, he spoke in jest and tried to abate by ridicule the anger of the furious mob. He also clearly showed that a particular accusation was brought in vain. A Roman officer would never have thought a man condemned of plotting for a kingdom and revolution against Rome would be worthy of release. He bore witness then to Jesus' utter innocence by the very reasons he gave for Jesus' release. That might go in our other sermon. Barabbas. Barabbas and Jesus compared. Ooh, Origen might have hot fire for us here. There's a likeness between the names of Barabbas and Jesus that is nothing short of a true mystery. Barabbas is appointed for making sedition and wars and murders in the souls of people, but Jesus is appointed for all good things as the Son of God and peace and word and wisdom. These two, therefore, are bound in both human things and bodies. Here the people of the Jews ask for Barabbas to be released to them. Therefore that nation, Israel, does not cease from having seditions and murders and robberies as regards some of their own race in outward things, but also in regards all the Jews who do not believe in Jesus, who also have struggles within their own souls. For where Jesus is not, there are seditions and quarrels and battles. But where Jesus is, all good things and innumerable spiritual riches, along with peace, rest in their hands. For he is our peace, who made both one. If anyone sees the opposite take place, he will recognize in them all that notable prisoner, Barabbas, whose release is craved not only then by the sinful Israel according to the flesh, but also by all like them in either doctrine or life. Whoever therefore does evil things in his body frees Barabbas and binds Christ. But whoever does good things frees Christ and binds Barabbas. So not as much because he focuses in on Israel as a nation, but there is some relatedness towards the end there that I find helpful, right? this piece. Whoever therefore does evil things in his body frees Barabbas and binds Christ, but whoever does good things frees Christ and binds Barabbas. Seeking to defame Christ, Chrysostom. How many were offended when they made that dreadful and monstrous assertion that the robber and the housebreaker, the man laden with the crime of murder, deserved to be released rather than Jesus? How many were offended when, having received permission from the judge to make their choice, they preferred Barabbas, desiring not only to crucify Christ, but also to involve him in infamy? For they thought that by these means they should be able to manufacture the belief that he was worse than the robber, and such a great transgressor that neither on the plea of mercy nor the privilege of the festival was it possible to save him. For they did everything for the purpose of slandering his fame. This is also why they crucified the two robbers with him. Nevertheless, the letter was not obscured, but shone forth all the more clearly. Let's go to Origen now. Celsus's comparison of Christ to a robber or a murderer is anticipated in the Gospels, since God was numbered with the transgressors by wicked people who wanted a murderer, one who had been cast into prison for sedition and murder, to be released to them, and wanted Jesus to be crucified. And they crucified him between two robbers. Jesus indeed is always being crucified with robbers among his genuine disciples and witnesses to the truth, and he suffers the same condemnation they do among people, if indeed we grant that those people have any resemblance to robbers, but who, because of their godly lives, suffer all kinds of injury and death, so that they may keep their lives clean and pure. But neither Jesus nor they were put to death according to any form of justice, and so his persecutors are the ones who should incur the charge. Finally, one robber not exchanged for another, Cyril. For they preferred a robber to him who did not regard his equality with God the Father as robbery. Oh, it's a reference to Colossians, right? Philippians. Did not regard equality with God something to be held on to at any cost, and took our poverty upon him for this very end, that is, he might deliver us from the true murderer, that is Satan. For the assembly, by its clamor, put him to death, though Pilate invited them to choose his release. In this way, even those who had not learned the divine law might be proved better than those instructed in the law. That's very interesting. So here we have Cyril of Alexandria. Cross-reference potential, Philippians 2:6, Cyril of Alexandria. Did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited. And he means robbery. All right, done with the ACCS. Let's run to the RCS. Okay, this is the same idea that we just read, but instead of early church fathers like Augustine and Cyril, etc., this one is a compilation of Reformed, evangelical, I guess those are anachronistic terms given what we're talking about, but the reformers, right? Those who were seeking to change things around the time of the Protestant Reformation. Let's see if they have any insights for us. Man, they have a lot to say on this one. Okay, not too bad. First, Johannes Brenz. Pilate testifies to Christ's innocence. This testimony to Christ's innocence is borne by a Gentile and an outsider, even as Christ is accused by his own people. Thus, the gospel is scarcely heard by his own, but heard more eagerly by outsiders. Here again, as in Pilate, you have an example of civil righteousness, which has its rightful praise, even though we cannot stand in the sight of God. This is interesting. So, gospel is more attractive to outsiders, question mark. Johannes Brenz. And the reason I bring this up is in my attempt to focus on the spiritual significance of choosing Barabbas over Christ, that might actually be insightful for us. The fact that those his own rejected him, it might be true in the church as well, you see. And we might have a tendency, because Christ is familiar to us, to reject him in practice, whereas others welcome him with open arms. Pilate's judgment was commendable. George Hutchison. Christ was cleared even by his enemies and persecutors to be innocent in his own person, so that believers may be confirmed in the faith of his suffering for them and his standing in their room, and his fitness for that work, being a spotless sacrifice. Men's passions and particular prejudices and resentments against persons ought not blind their judgments nor bias them in evaluating causes. This is commendable in Pilate, that though he had been somewhat agitated and not much taken with what Christ said of all the truth, yet when he comes out and he says, I find in him no fault. Nothing there that I really want to run with. Here we have Benedict Aridius. Consider here the fruit of Christ's death. Christ must die so that the robber may live. And so he lives by Christ's gift, and rightly so. For we are the image of that robber, children of wrath, children of Adam, ministers of sin, instruments of Satan, and we could not be released if the innocent Son of God had not been made a sacrifice for us. So he's basically saying we're Barabbas, right? Barabbas' release signifies our redemption. Thus he is handed over for our great good. Let us therefore take care that this Barabbas, lying hidden in our members, may be purged away and restrained more and more day by day, that we may be members of the innocent Christ. I like this a lot. Benedict Aridius. Exactly the sort of thing we're interested in here. So, to me, this could go with the scapegoat theme. See Benedict Aridius, RCS. But then also, this could go with its own symbolic idea. I'm not quite seeing it here. The Barabbas of our flesh, something like that. Of our own flesh. And then this is also RCS Benedict Aridius. Nice. Okay, what is the foundation of the custom from John Trapp? John Trapp is so funny. He is just like the feistiest dude ever. I love his commentary on John. What is the foundation of the custom? And John Trapp, an ungainly, ungodly custom it was, whatever the grounds of it were. Some think it was in memory of Jonathan, rescued from his father by the people. Others, that the feast might be celebrated with greater joy and gladness. Others, more probably, in remembrance of their deliverance from Egyptian bondage. But why should Barabbas escape by it? A bloody man shall flee to the pit, and no man can stay him. I'll put it, I can't at the moment see where I might use it, but I'll put it down just in case. 3 perspectives on the release of Barabbas from George Hutchison. I didn't like his comment much earlier, so let's see what he says here. If we look at Pilate's part in this procedure, it may teach partly that human policy and carnal friends and their interposing will readily do Christ and his followers little successful service in a strait. He deals for Christ in a politic way, which did not avail partly because whenever people have a conscience of duty, it does not advantage them before God if they do not put themselves forward in the utmost in their stations to see that done which is right. For while Pilate endeavors serve indeed to clear Christ's innocence, and Pilate in conscience judged him so, yet all that is not enough, seeing as he did not employ his authority and power to rescue and defend the innocent, but only essays, oratory, and policy. Partly also because that such as would faithfully follow conscience and light need to hold a loose grip of all other enjoyments and interests, and partly, particularly, to avoid affection of popularity. This was Pilate's snare, that though he judged Christ innocent and thought that he ought to be delivered, yet not being willing to lose the people, he only uses insinuations and policies. So this is actually really good for our sermon on Pilate. Continuing. If we look on the Jews' proceedings in this business, it may teach partly that people, abjured and hardened by God's judicial stroke, will neither regard civility, reason, nor common sense. Light will not convince them, not equity persuade them to what is right. This appeared in the obstinate Jews, albeit Pilate's procedure was very effectual in its kind, for he propounds it to their choice, Barabbas being a man whom common civility might make them ashamed to own or seek or exempt from punishment and prefer him to Christ. This is actually good. He insinuates his own inclination, and that it would be a courtesy if they would seek Jesus to be released. Withal, he names him King of the Jews, insinuating that his death would tend to discredit their nation, bearing one such a name and accusing the multitude of levity, who not long since had proclaimed him their king, and now would have him crucified. Yet all this does not prevail with them. Partly also it teaches that no persons, however vile, are so odious in the eyes of the enemies of God and Christ and his followers and friends, for so much did Christ himself find Barabbas a robber, being preferred to him. So this is George Hutchison. Ah, there we go. Pressed F11 randomly on accident. All right. If we look to the hand of God and Christ in all this, without which nothing was done in the business, it may teach. 1. Christ would have it evidently seen by us that he suffered by the appointment of God, that he loves to do so, in that he would not permit any endeavor for his release to succeed. 2. He would not be released, but crucified at the Passover, that he might prove himself the true Passover sacrifice for us, and dying at such a time the smell of his death might spread far and near by reason of the great concourse of time. 3. Christ has sanctified unto his people disappointments in the matter of deliverance, when otherwise it might seem probable, hereby also encouraging them to suffer when these disappointments it is clear they should suffer, for he in his own person is not released. 4. While Barabbas a robber is preferred to Christ, it may serve to put us to mind that however in himself, and as to them who sought his life, he was the most innocent, yet considering Christ in his surety, he had more to suffer forever than Barabbas committed, and therefore to arrest in divine justice, while the others permitted to escape. This should invite everyone who claims interest in his death to lay heart, his share in those provocations and crimes which were laid on Christ. Christ has sanctified unto the godly, there being worse esteemed off in the world than the worst of people, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Let's do this last one. Theodore Beza. On the Passover, all uncleanness under this law was specially and expressly forbidden. Is he getting this from, we just read Numbers. Is he getting this from Cyril? No, he's not. Now, this most solemn day was the 14th day of the first month, beginning with sundown on the 14th, at which time the lamb was to be eaten, as Christ observed with his apostles according to the precept of the law, as the narrative above clearly testifies. The circumstances show that the Jews, as they do today, were even then observing the festival according to tradition, and had delayed that solemn festival, the first day of unleavened bread, when the lamb was to be eaten, to another day, namely the evening of the 16th, so that they would not be forced to abstain from all servile work for 2 whole days, on the 15th on account of the Passover, and on the 16th when the Sabbath day fell on that year. And this is the reason why the 16th day, which followed the Lord's Day, is said to have been a great Sabbath, since it had a double day of preparation, namely, one for the Passover and another for the ordinary Sabbath. Although some refer this refusal to enter Pilate's headquarters so they could eat the Passover, not the eating of the lamb, but either to the eating of unleavened bread or other sacrifices. So the Jews would seem to have eaten the lamb. This is detail I don't need. All right, good. Well, we finished that. Exegetical summaries now. And one of the reasons I like this one, guys, especially if you don't have a full library, is because it gives you summaries of what a lot of the other commentaries say. And so you can get a good idea of all of the issues that are at hand, primary issues that are at hand in the commentaries without actually reading them all, right? And so it's a good shorthand if needed. It will also give you those commentaries, so if you have them, you can look a little bit more in depth. But at the end of the day, I think this one's really good. Notice it brings up several of the lexical issues. You could sometimes consult this even before you do the word studies yourself, right? And again, look, it brings up the issues in the text. You know, we've already seen questions about whose custom was this? Well, they bring it up. Okay, so let's just read through this real quick. I won't go to the lexical questions, although they're helpful if you're doing original word studies, but I will do the exegetical questions, okay? So, what was this a custom of the Jews or of Pilate? And the answer is, since a literal translation may imply that the Jews themselves released the prisoner, it may be necessary to translate, it is customary for me to set free a prisoner for you during the Passover. So that's just brought up by the translator's handbook, which is actually helpful, okay? Barclay and Nida. And so this comes from, I forget the resource, but yeah, they're the handbooks that are used in translation on the Bible. So that's very helpful. Offering an alternative translation. Is there a problem between the identity of the pronoun you and the title King of the Jews in Pilate's questions? Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Since the pronoun you refers to the Jews, as does the phrase in the title King of the Jews, it may be necessary to translate, do you want me to do you the favor of setting free your king? Otherwise, readers might assume Pilate was addressing a group of non-Jews. Okay, not as needed. This is valuable, though, so we'll throw this in there. So these are translation questions. But then here's another one. What is Pilate's attitude as he asks this question? And notice how many commentaries are referenced here. Okay, lots of different commentaries. He uses the term King of the Jews ironically and sarcastically, but he is addressing the Jews. not Jesus whom he respects. He mocks the Jews, thinking that it was ridiculous to suggest that this prisoner, bound and helpless, was the only king they could put forward. Pilate thinks that the charge of the Jews against Jesus was absurd. He was trying to antagonize the Jewish authorities. He thought the use of the full title King of the Jews would serve to sway the Jews in Jesus' favor. Nothing here in terms of what I'm looking to preach on. Okay, verse 40, again, good lexical information. We could probably grab everything here under lay stace. That's going to be handy, right? So we'll just throw this up in our word study that we had from earlier. Right here, right? Yeah, because all this Barabbas stuff is from when I did the theological dictionaries. So when I was in the lexicons, I was here. So we'll throw this here as well from the exegetical summaries. Okay. What attitude is understood in the term Teuton, this man? It's probably spoken with disrespect. Okay. What is indicated by the presence of the article with the name Ton Baraban? Not this man, but the Barabbas. The definite article indicates that he was the well-known Barabbas. That's interesting, to say the least, because I'm trying to treat him in a more symbolic fashion. I'll treat him in a historical fashion as well, but I think both are present. But that makes sense. Maybe not on the well-known, but the fact that, he is a stand-in for a certain type of choice people can make. What is indicated by the conjunction de now? It indicates the statement Barabbas was a robber is parenthetical or an aside. What does the word Pauline have in its usual meaning, again or back, as in a reply? And if we've done our previous studies well, the Pauline, it was Pauline. I was going to say the Pauline is not supposed to be present, but that's not true. It was Pauline Pontes or whatever. So the Pontes is the one that is in not all the manuscripts. Pauline, it means back or in reply. They shouted in reply. They answered him with a shout. This probably means they shouted back in response. They cried out a second time. They cried out once more. Presupposes a previous outcry. Probably best interpretation of this word is a translation of the Aramaic inferential conjunction tube, which means thereupon. Okay, so there's a lot going on there. I don't need any of this information for our sermon. All right, good. Exegetical summaries. Let's go to Pillar. And just a couple short paragraphs here from D.A. Carson. If Pilate had been stamped with integrity, his verdict would have ended the matter. Jesus would have been released and the Jewish authorities dismissed. For whatever reason, to help the Jews save face, to save his own skin, because he had already received private threats akin to a public threat, to embarrass the authorities before the crowds whom he thought would support Jesus, he offered to release Jesus in accordance with the custom of the season that year. The cast of his question, "Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" suggests he was still trying to antagonize the authorities, since this was the title they specifically denied could outright be ascribed to Jesus. Let's put this in our other notes on Pillar. All four canonical Gospels tell us a little of Barabbas, whose full name may have been Jesus Barabbas. There's a variant reading in support of the longer name in Matthew 27:16 and 17. He was a lestes, one who seizes and plunders. In the hands of some of the first century authors, however, the word depicts not simply a brigand, but a terrorist from the Roman point of view. He means Josephus, a guerrilla from the nationalist perspective, hence NIV's taken part in a rebellion. And we said the NIV had an interesting translation at this point. It participated in bloody insurrection from Matthew 15:7. Thus, at the instigation of the chief priests, who normally had nothing to do with zealots and others interested in armed rebellion, the crowds called for the release of a man who had committed murder in his struggle against Rome, while condemning a man falsely accused of being in danger to Rome. Pilate cannot fail to see the irony. What will he do? I actually don't need any of this. This we already found in some of our other studies. We'll take it. It's a good summary of our research up to this point, so we may use it as a quote. Additional note, there is no unambiguous extra-biblical evidence for this custom. It has led not a few scholars to doubt its historicity. One passage in the Mishnah probably refers to it. They may slaughter the Passover lamb for a variety of people whose actual condition is uncertain. For example, invalids including one whom they had promised to bring out of prison. Such a prisoner could scarcely have been under restraints by a Jewish court, since the court would know the demands of the Passover and could be counted on to make a clean decision one way or another. Special promise of release by a foreign court at Passover season seems to be in view. The fact that legislation is required suggests these releases occurred with some regularity. Although Mark 15:8 pictures the crowd asking for the release of a prisoner according to custom, while John has Pilate bringing the matter up, the custom itself is still assumed. It is not unlikely that some request was made to Pilate before his public offer. Just as there must have been some formal charge laid against Jesus before Pilate began his interrogation. So this is actually really helpful as background info. Sometimes I call these fun facts because this is the sort of information that a lot of people would kind of be wondering about. These are the sorts of questions I often get in the foyer, even though to me, they often don't relate as much to the primary, application I'm trying to make of the text. It's still relevant. So I'll put here, fun fact, custom ? C. Pillar, D.A. Carson. Boom. All right, finally, guys, to round out a lot of the commentaries we've added here, boom, we've got the Life Application Bible Commentary. To me, application is really important. We're going through all these details, all that type of stuff. But to have a commentary that causes you to focus on, think about your individual members of your congregation, to me is extremely valuable. So that's why we had this one included. Bruce Barton, I think this is a good commentary set. And look, you can see 2 paragraphs here, plus a little bit of background on who is Barabbas. So, Pilate hoped to escape passing judgment on Jesus by allowing the Jews to determine Jesus' fate. If they asked for Jesus' release, then Pilate would be free from convicting an innocent man. If they refused Jesus, the onus of Jesus' execution would be on them, not on Pilate. We've already seen that. The second one, the screaming Jewish officials demanded that a convicted rebel, Barabbas, be pardoned instead of Jesus. The Greek word lestes was used to describe rebels against Roman authority. Barabbas was a rebel against Rome, and although he had committed murder, he was probably a hero among the Jews. The Jews hated being governed by Rome and paying taxes to the despised government. Barabbas, who had led a rebellion and failed, was released instead of Jesus, the only one who could truly help Israel. So you can see from a life application standpoint, they're focusing on their situation rather than on like what God is doing. So their perspective needs work, right? So from an application standpoint, perspective matters. They viewed the Barabbas and Jesus relationship backwards. All righty. Final little section they have here. Who is Barabbas? Let's just go ahead and see what they have to say. And you can see it's slightly wider. Oh, we can just scroll over. Perfect. Who is Barabbas? Jewish men had names that identified them with their fathers. Simon Peter, for example, is called Simon, son of Jonah. Barabbas is never identified by his given name. And this name is not much help either. Barabbas means son of Abba or son of daddy. Barabbas, son of unnamed father, committed a crime. Jesus died in his place so that this man was set free. We too are sinners and criminals who have broken God's holy law. Like Barabbas, we deserve to die. But Jesus died in our place for our sins, and we have been set free. We don't have to be very important people to accept our freedom in Christ. In fact, thanks to Jesus, God adopts us all as his own sons and daughters and gives us the right to call him Abba, Daddy. That's like a really nicely done devotional thought that will tie in perfectly with some personal application, right? Perfect. Okay, guys. I will not go ahead and go into Alexander Maclaren, but I want you to know that, he has some great sermons, and they're short, so they're often easy to read through if you're having some homiletic insight that you want to find. And I love his stuff. Okay, and that's why I included him. But here we go, guys. That took just over 2 hours. So we went about as long as we did before, and you could see we still had additional resources that we could consult, but we are well on our way to having prepared a great sermon here. We need to develop a homiletical outline to preach out of everything that we found, but here we have Barabbas as a consistent theme. There are many good applications we can make of people choosing Barabbas over Jesus. We do the same in our own lives, but then also, of course, we are forgiven because, the true Son of the Father went to the cross and died on our behalf. He's our scapegoat. And so there are just so many good ideas that are present here in these verses. So I hope you guys found this helpful. And we're hoping to do one more of these on the large study bundle. And we'll treat another set of verses and jump into them. And again, this just gives you a broad overview of how I utilize these resources, why I picked the ones I did, so that in particular, if you're looking to dig into this type of content, that you have something available for you to do so, okay? So hopefully this gives you a little bit of a sense of how to utilize the Pastor Tanner Study Bundle, the medium version, and we'll catch you all again real soon for the large version. Thanks so much for supporting us here on YouTube. Please consider utilizing my links down below in any of our videos. Gets me a small commission, and because I'm an affiliate with Logos. But thank you so much, and I hope you guys all have a great week. We'll talk to you again real soon. Take care. God bless.